So, after much research, as always for me, and after not jumping in buying a Fenix 6 a year or so ago, I decided to plunge back into the murky depths of retail therapy and buy a Fenix 7X. I figured if I was to spend, I should spend the most and get the most. So, I went with the Pro Solar Sapphire. The size wasn't a put-off. It's the same 51mm diameter as my existing watch. It's replacing a well-used Fenix 3HR Sapphire, bought for $200 Australian in January 2020. A watch I've used steadily to track rides, walks and runs in and around Australia and a little bit overseas. So why the Fenix 7? Well, after my 3HR I got stuck in Darwin working in January. 2 days turned into 11 and I hadn't packed the charge dock. Silly me. I didn't run out of battery, but the watch ended up being just that, a watch. And because GPS gobbles battery, it wasn't an option to track any walks, despite having one amazing day walking around Litchfield National Park. I think I came home with 5% battery. So I was definitely chasing battery life with a new watch, and the Fenix 7X Solar tops the list. So was this a mistake? Well, yes and no. Look, I'm just a Joe average, early 50s bloke trying to stay fit in a world of accessible fast food and couch binge TV. I run, I practice martial arts, I cycle, both in the bush and on the road. That's my main weapon of choice. Normally I don't wear a watch at all. If I need the time, it's everywhere. It's on the computer, the oven, the microwave, the phone, the alarm clock, the kitchen clock, even my old VCR. So I originally bought the Fenix 3HR simply to track kilometres run or cycled. I'm no serious athlete, I'm not on Strava, and I only compete with myself. So when I finished an activity, the watch got turned off and taken off. No dramas. I had what I needed, which was track kilometres and metres climbed. I've never really used it for sleep tracking apart from to test and as a bit of a gimmick. I just don't need a watch to tell me if I've slept well. I can work that much out myself. Plus a watch on my wrist at night is uncomfortable and disturbs my sleep anyway. Quid pro quo. Sure, battery life on the 3HR was always a bit of an Achilles heel, using about 10% battery every hour for GPS. But so are Apple Watches, which mates say need to be charged daily if you use GPS for anything. So I took the plunge 3 months ago in March, buying myself a used Fenix 7X Pro Solar Sapphire. God, what a mouthful. Why this model? Because it's the range topper and I never wanted to regret missing out on a feature. So, what's the rub? Yes, absolutely it's a big improvement over the 3HR. How could it not be? The boot up time is slower, but it's got more going on under the bonnet. And Garmin never want you to turn this thing off. More on that later. The touchscreen works well, but it does go bonkers in the shower. And I'm so well trained using the 3HR that I still use buttons almost all of the time. I've never used maps or trackback. I know where I am, but I'm sure it could come in useful deep in the bush and it's nice to know it's there. The face visibility is slightly worse on the 7X. I think it attracts more finger grease from the touchscreen, and the solar screen I think blocks a bit of light as well. What do I love? The battery life is stonkingly good, lasting weeks without having to even worry about it. I also love the flashlight on the 7X, very useful. But the phone has one too. The different data fields you can squeeze onto the face are good, but really, in the bush cycling, you can't even glance at a speedo without hitting a tree, so it's only partly useful for me when road riding, running or walking. The touch pay feature is fabulous. I can go for a run or a ride and not be the skint mate who forgot his wallet so as to skip buying around. It's clever too. If you buy something, a countdown timer starts, giving you 60 seconds to finish your purchase before reverting back to the watch face. And if you use it again for another purchase within a few minutes, it bypasses the 4-digit passcode, and you can keep using the touch pay in the middle of an activity as well, which is neat. The multiple data fields are a bit of a gimmick. You really only need to see one thing at once. Button protection is apparently improved on the 7, and I've certainly not had any issues with the 7X, but I have accidentally stopped an activity on the 3HR by bumping buttons, so I'd agree that it's been improved. The GPS lock-on time on the 7 is awesome. I mean, it's really fast. With the 3HR, I'd often find myself waiting to get a lock-on before starting an activity. Otherwise, if you start an activity before you get a GPS lock, the GPS track goes haywire, sometimes starting you hundreds of metres off course. Well, what about screens? The 3HR has a 30mm colour screen compared to the 7X's 35mm diameter screen. Both are good, both are easy to read. 7X has a more even backlight if I'm being picky. And as I said, I think the 3HR is slightly easier to read. The GPS pause feature is great as well. On the 3HR, when you pause an activity, it times out much faster than the 7X. They both autosave and you can resume later. But the Fenix 7X is just way better at managing this and gives you haptic feedback before it starts autosave, which is neat. I must say, after walking the streets of Tokyo in January using the 3HR, the GPS was all over the place like a mad woman's breakfast, quite erratic to the point of being useless. But all GPS systems struggle around skyscrapers, so not surprising. The heart rate variability is something I thought I'd use more, but once you have some data, it doesn't change much. Well, at least not at my age. So to me it's, oh, that's interesting, a bit like VO2 max. Maybe if I was more serious it would mean something, but as I said, I represent Active Joe Average, not nut job it's 4 AM, let's go for a jog Joe Athletic. So what is it that niggles? What don't I like? Well, the new features mean more setting up out of the box and more buttons to press to get going. Apple started a subtle trend and Samsung followed suit, and now Garmin has jumped on board. They never want you to turn the bloody things off. Apple famously said a few years ago that people weren't buying new iPhones, so they had to invent another device to further our technology addiction. So they developed the iWatch. Very pretty, very stylish device to give you data that most people neither understand nor use. But like iPods, they've got batteries with a finite life, which are normally not user replaceable, forcing unnecessary upgrades. In 2 months switched off sitting in a cupboard, the 3HR battery went down by 50%. So these things just aren't meant to sit in cupboards, they're meant to be worn. So that's my main gripe, that Garmin has managed to create a device that is intended never to be taken off, to give you more incomprehensible, but I must say, very pretty data that actually, for most people, is probably meaningless. It's not going to make you exercise more, it won't make you spend more time doing important things like being with your family, but it will try its best to funnel you into upgrades and more similar tech purchases. So look, it's caveat emptor for me. Look, I love the battery life and the fast GPS lock-on. GPS accuracy for both of them is fine. Even with the 3HR, I can see which side of the street I'm on, either on the phone app or on the PC. People have complained that 3HR accuracy isn't great, but really, how accurate do you need it to be? I'm also sure maps will be useful on the 7X Pro, but they haven't been yet. So now to the biggest whinge, the damn price. The 7X Pro retails down here in Australia for $1,600. That's eye-watering cash for latest model bragging rights. I paid $200 for the 3HR 2 years ago when it was already 4 years old. That was just after the Fenix 6 had been released at $1,400. So back then I followed the rules of engagement, which is new model gets released, old models drop sharply in price. As this is the latest model, I bought in at top tier pricing and paid $1,000 for a nice condition box 7X Pro Solar Sapphire. Still, that's 60% of recommended retail for a current model, almost 40% depreciation in 12 months. By my loose logic, in 4 years, you'll pay about $650 for a 7X Pro Solar Sapphire, which is the current market street price for a 6X Pro Solar Sapphire. So I think my numbers are about right. And why not buy a new one? Well, I figured if I scratched a new one, I'd have buyer's remorse big time. This way, mine is already worn in and battle hardened, so if I knock it, I'll be less precious. I do use things like temperature and tides, especially swimming at the beach. And I do use the compass, which I've got to say was invaluable on the 3HR navigating the labyrinth of Tokyo subways. But I was surprised that some of the features needed to be turned on the 7X, whereas on the 3HR they were already there operating as part of the UI. Not an issue once set up, but it is a trap for young players. Also, the 3HR compass shows altimeter and barometer on a single display. The 7X Pro doesn't do this on the compass widget, only in the ABC glance loop. So when you tap the down button, that's what you see, but it would be useful to have it on the actual compass app. So why, Garmin? The health snapshots are a great new feature, but again, data for data's sake perhaps?
So I just want to pause here just for a second to consider the difference in GPS satellite acquisition times. The new Fenix 7 took just 15 seconds. The old Fenix 3HR took 5 minutes and 50 seconds. That's on a cloudless day, partial shading by the house roof with GLONASS on. That's 23 times longer for the Fenix 3HR to log on compared to the Fenix 7 to a satellite so you can start your activity. With GLONASS off, again, clear skies and no building shading, the Fenix 7 took just 5 seconds and the Fenix 3HR took 37 seconds. That's 7 times longer.
Look, there's a fitness age feature which takes into account vigorous activity. Does it use the same criteria for vigorous activity as intensity minutes? No idea. There are also screens for flow, grit and stamina when mountain biking, which are probably a bit wanky. I did a 44-kilometre ride last weekend and my stamina ended at 36%. How accurate is it? Will I die at 0%? Can it go negative? No idea. From another user's report, if you calculate stress with a chest heart rate monitor using the heart rate variability stress app, you get a radically different value than when you use the stress app from the watch-based monitor in Health Snapshot. Perhaps this isn't surprising, but HRV stress only works with a chest HRM, and the Health Snapshot only works with the built-in wrist HRM. How do you integrate them both? Well, apparently you don't. So really I folded and bought into upgrade-itis. My old Sapphire 3HR does everything I need it to be. It's actually slightly easier to read in all conditions compared to the 7X. And if it gets lost, so what? It's $130, not $1,000, which is a lot to sever from anyone's hip pocket nerve. Will I sell the 7X? Nah, I'll sell the 3HR. So knowing what I know now, would I still buy one? Look, knowing me, probably. Mainly for the battery life security, which is a bit like range anxiety for electric vehicles here in Australia. It's more perception than a real issue. But nonetheless, look, the torch is great and it really is a properly useful tool. All the other stuff, the HRV, the VO2 Max, look, they're all a bit of a gimmick to me. Now, to close this, my final advice, if you're on a budget, get a Fenix 3HR Sapphire or a 5X. They're both fantastic. The 5X has maps, and if you do get a 7, don't be afraid to take it off. We shouldn't be ruled by our doodads. Thanks for watching, everyone.